All right. So you can see right now the very first page describes our options for learning, depending on the phase. So back in the spring, we were actually in phase 2 and 3. That's what moved us into all remote virtual learning. We are not in that phase as we speak today on August 12th. And if I could, if all of you could make sure your mics are muted so that we really limit the feedback on that. Appreciate that. So again, we're in phase 4, which allows us some face-to-face interaction in school. So our plan is twofold for face-to-face instruction. Our elementary, pre-K through 5th grade, is face-to-face 5 days a week, following all the safety protocols and guidelines that we're required to do, and a hybrid model for our 6th through 12th grade students, which we have cohorts. A group will come Monday, Tuesday, another group will be there Thursday and Friday, and then Wednesday is all remote virtual learning taught by our Three Rivers teachers. We do have an option for families that do not want to send their student back to school at all due to various reasons. We'll have a virtual learning platform called Lincoln Learning that they can utilize. We're asking both sides, face-to-face families as well as virtual learning families, to commit for a semester. Like I said, the landscape could change pretty quickly, and that'll dictate determining whether, if we get pushed back into phase 3, we'll go to all remote learning. But as we sit here right now, we're going to start in phase 4. This is our plan. So I'm going to turn the rest of it over to Nikki Nash, my Director of Curriculum and Instruction, who spearheaded our district team in developing this plan.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Lincoln Learning and the virtual option for those of you who have chose that or have questions on that. It is a third-party program, as Mr. Moak said. It is directed and courses uploaded and made sure that all the standards are aligned through a certified teacher. That is Michigan certified, because as you know, we are required to have certified teachers attached to courses. So they will upload and make sure the course is set for you when you are on there or you're following your course. Each student, pre-K through 12, will be given a full load. So you'll have the 4 core classes and 2 electives. Elementary, we're looking at if you'll have all 3 areas, but they will be assigned each course, depending on which grade you are in, our average of 45 to 60 minutes per day. Now, if you get in a little lower, like kindergarten, 1st grade, it may be 35 minutes. If you go up to high school, it might be 60 to 70 minutes, 75 minutes for some. So it is a range, but there is a huge commitment. It's going to look very different than what it did in the spring when we had the closure, when they just had to participate. They'll have daily attendance. We will have a mentor on the Three Rivers side. So there will be a certified teacher that the student can reach out to get support if they need it. The mentor will also be looking at the pace to make sure that the course is being done on the same pace as the students in the classroom that are attending in the building, to make sure, let's say they wanted, first of all, if they want to join, if they find out going through this semester, yeah, this is not for me, I want to go back to face-to-face, we want to make sure that our students are going along the same track. The other part is if we go full school year virtual and then next year you want to come back face-to-face, we want to make sure that they are coming along the same path so that they're ready for the school year, the following year, along with their peers. Again, that mentor will look at your pacing. There will be the 2-way communication between the student and the family. They're required to at minimum 1 day a week, but up to 2, at least maybe 3 times a week. There is tech support, so they will be available to get you the tech support if not. So let's say I'm a high school student and I have a math teacher that's my mentor. If you need some additional help in science and they can't help you with that, then we will refer you to a science teacher to get that support. Elementary teachers are certified in all subject areas, so most generally, those elementary teachers can support all of the students in K-5, some even in 6, because we do have some certified teachers at middle school that are elementary certified. So as far as the process, how this looks, we are currently right now in working with the contract to get that all set, to get the courses all set. What we're going to do is have a training for our administration, and then we have training for our mentors. And then from there, we'll get all of the students that have confirmed that they are going to participate in the virtual learning program. And we'll make sure that they are uploaded into PowerSchool. So their schedule will reflect, you'll be in PowerSchool, you'll reflect a Lincoln Learning classes. From there, then you will get your information as far as your sign-on. You will get a video and overview of what it looks like, how to be supported, and all of that information will come to the families at least 1 week prior to the start of the school year. So you'll have that information. We will have contacts for you at each building for the mentor, and obviously the building principals will be trained, so they'll have some information. It is a self-paced program, but what I do encourage you to do is, if you are going to do this, to make sure that you allow at least, like I say, at least 6 hours a day to make sure that you're completing all of your courses. So if you're a parent that is going to come home in the evening and help your child, if you have somebody that can help them during the day and then you come home at night to help in their course, that's perfectly fine. But just know to be able to set those expectations for yourself and your family to keep on course, because they are rigorous. It is self-taught, self-paced, self-graded kind of, but with the help of the support teacher on our end. So I'm going to open it up. Ron, I do see that we are at 250 people, so we reached our capacity of how many we can have in Google Meet, so that might be something we want to take note of. So questions about Lincoln Learning?
It's being recorded, by the way.
Yeah. So I'm seeing a few people here. Elementary kids, how many hours are expected online? Again, that is going to go by grade level, but on average, it's about 45 minutes per course, and you're going to have 6 courses. So a little, about 6 hours a day. How does attendance work? So attendance goes based on your course completion. So as you're completing the course, we need to track that you get through for that week. Just like if you were in the building, if you're falling behind, we would take the same protocols as we would if you were face-to-face, that we would have to turn in for truancy, because you have the same accountability and we have the same accountability to make sure that students are attending, and we have that reporting system in place. So it really is a week course to make sure that you're going along. Ashley, the K2 for the shorter timeline, it really is about 35, 40 minutes. So I wouldn't say it's a whole lot shorter.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, what about CTE class? Is that still going to be offered for high school?
Yes.
Okay,
and I know Carrie Balk is on here, and I know we're working on some things to make sure that our CTE students get the full experience as if they were here virtual or face-to-face.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Nikki, there was a question. Oh, go ahead.
I have a question. Will the Chromebooks be provided for the kids that are doing the online learning?
Yes. So the virtual students are still considered Three Rivers Community students. They're just choosing to take their school at home. So you still have the same experience as far as your standards, your same requirements for attendance. We can get you the Chromebooks just like we were for any other student that are students. It's just, you're just choosing a different setting. but you are still Three Rivers School students. So you're the same as if you're home or if you're in the building.
Nikki, there was a question about the 3 days online middle school and high school work. So the days are not face-to-face.
So the remote learning for the 3 days that are middle school, high school, those again are the same situation. You will be provided either live, recorded videos or videos that are provided by other places like Khan Academy, such as that. So you'll have assignments, and it's staggered, but it's still a 6-hour day. So the staggering looks like, let's say I go to school on Monday, Tuesday, I have Wednesday remote learning. There you will attend each hour. Thursday, Friday. On Thursday, you will attend first, third, and fifth hour. There will be assignments up to 2 hours for both, so it's an hour each. And then on the next day is, and don't quote me if I didn't say which day was, but 2, 4, and 6 would be the other day. So you will be provided that layout when we start school, so you'll know what that looks like. There'll be Google assignments for 3rd through 12th, and then Seesaw we're using K2. And I talk with my hands, so if you're seeing me move.
I do have a question as well.
Yes.
If we were to buy our own Chromebooks, is there school material that has to be downloaded onto it? If we were to do that?
Nope. Everything that we have is basically website based. So there's not anything, and maybe Carrie, I don't know if there's some of the online courses that are that way, but most everything that's done K-12 is all web based.
I have a question.
Yes.
The remote learning on the 3 days, are those students also going to be provided with the Chromebooks?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Yes.
For the elementary students, class-wise, how many students would be in each class?
Ron, do you want, I know we're looking at numbers currently right now. Some information was sent out by the principals to get a definite number on how many students are going to choose the virtual option. So we're trying right now to get a definite understanding. We have a document that we're looking at, we're monitoring every day. So they range, and I didn't look at the document today. I don't know, Ron, if you have,
I had
for every class level.
So Nikki, what was that, the last time you looked at it, what was the range of class level?
Anywhere from 12 in a classroom up to 22. That's elementary. High school, middle school, again, anywhere from, well, depending on the cohorts, because we'll finish all of those. Those will be 15 to 20.
So if there's 22 kids in the class, how are they going to do the 6 feet apart?
Ron, do you want to talk about, I know that's one thing we talked about.
Yeah, so it depends on, some of them have tables, so the tables are about 5 feet in length, 4 to 5 feet. So they'll do their best. Again, it's a recommendation. We know that we're going to get as close to 6 feet as possible. That's why we've strongly recommended for elementary students to wear the masks in class. Again, it's not required by the Michigan return to school roadmap that Governor Whitmer put out, but it is strongly recommended. So, and then individual desks, they're doing their best to rearrange classrooms to get as close to that 6 feet as possible.
And if it's not 6 feet, what are you guys planning on doing? You know, most of the younger kids are not going to want to keep their masks on all day long.
Right, right. So we're working with the principals to balance those numbers to make sure that we can get as close to achieving that 6 foot as possible. Again, going back to, it's not required for elementary kids to be wearing masks in the classroom. But again, we're strongly recommending, so teachers are looking at their activities to make sure that that they're doing their best to have activities involved where kids are not interacting as close as pre-COVID. and certainly less than 15 minutes. So the new guidelines and new information coming out for the Center for Disease Control and our St. Joe County Health Department, this intense exposure is really the issue where people are becoming infected. And what that is people within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes and not wearing a mask. And so again, we're taking that all into consideration, and teachers are working hard at looking at their activities and lessons to limit those interactions.
For the IEP students, are they going to be able to still have one-on-one learning if needed in school?
That again depends on their individual education plan. So if that was part of the accommodation prior to pre-COVID, we are required by that individual education plan to provide those accommodations and strategies that are in it. So I know Dr. Lebeski, our Director of Special Education, is working with all our special ed staffs to review IEPs and look at what those accommodations and recommendations are to make sure that we can meet those.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question. Is there a possible way that middle school IEP be able to do some virtual?
If I heard your question correctly, Ms. Graves, you're asking, can my special ed student be virtual? And the answer is yes.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah. All
So
right.
any other questions about the virtual or remote?
Well, let's talk about Nikki, the health and safety snapshot. So there is always a lot of questions about what we're required to do in phase 4 and 5, which we are currently at. And one of the requirements for all students, K-12, is to wear face coverings while they're on the bus, in the hallway, common areas, coming into school, leaving school. The only time is excluding during meals and in the classroom for elementary students, but we're again strongly recommending that they wear them. Grades 6 through 12, they have to wear their face coverings all the time except when they're gonna have lunch or they're having breakfast. We have all rooms and strategic spots throughout the school set up with hand sanitizer stations, as well as in the classroom providing teachers with hand washing supplies as well as hand sanitizers. About every 2 or 3 hours, this type of sanitizing of hands and surfaces is going to go on. Again, we're going to work really hard at the social distancing and trying to meet that 6 foot recommended spacing issue. We will be serving meals. The high school and middle school, we are able to spread out enough and with the cohorts to serve lunch in the cafeterias. The elementaries will be served in their classrooms. And elementary will be having 1 recess a day per class. And we will be sanitizing equipment after they're done.
I have a question.
Sure.
What discipline procedures for students who break the mask and distancing rules? Usually, you know, are they left in the room, like to harm the other kid's health? And what will the policy be for, is it a zero tolerance policy for students who aren't compliant?
So I think the first part of your question was what happens if a mask gets broken, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to have masks, so we're just going to replace it. You know.
So what if a child is disruptive and won't wear a mask? Is that putting my child in harm's way,
Yeah.
what happens with the kids that are just going to completely ignore that rule?
So the non-compliant face mask wear,
Ron, your microphone's muted.
that I hit the wrong button. Again, to say that the non-compliant student will be given a mask to wear. If they continually are non-compliant, they'll be removed from the hallway or playground or classroom and brought down to the office, and a parent will be called, and there'll be a meeting and sent home for that day and say, you know, hey, mom and dad and student, you need to decide. You need to wear a face mask. Now, if we're talking a middle school, high school kid, they got to be wearing it all the time. In the elementary, it's strongly recommended in the classroom, but not required. But if we are aware that a family is not wanting to be compliant, we will have a meeting with them to convince them that it's in the best interest of your student as well as all the other students to be wearing that face mask as much as possible. But the compliant in the common areas, it's redirect, get them a face mask, or make it put them on, or if they continue to be non-compliant, we bring in the parent and have a parent meeting, and if it continues, then we have the right and will move them into a 100% virtual learning option through Lincoln Learning.
Okay, thank you. And then what about recess? Are the children, is it mandatory that they wear their face mask at recess?
Yes, so the requirement strongly recommended is that they wear face masks because, again, going back to that 6 foot, 15-minute intense exposure space, we can't guarantee that kids are not going to be out on the playground. No, it's only going to be one class at a time. We're not going to be able to guarantee that we're going to achieve that every single day while they're on the playground. So we had that brought up in our staff town hall. The principals are going to look at that and get some clarification from the health department in terms of, is there any flexibility with that?
I have a question. If one of the students is tested positive sometime, what happens to the rest of the students in the class?
Let me do this. That's a great segue into another piece of information I'd love to share with you all. So this is a decision tree put out by our St. Joe County Health Department dealing with that exact question. And again, it all depends on, so if you're talking about a student who's tested positive for COVID, there is a process that we go back. If it's an elementary classroom, we'll communicate with the elementary classroom to determine what we call contact tracing. Where was that student? How long were they in school before they tested positive? Because that incubation period is about 3 to 4 days. And depending on where that student was will depend on whether we shut the entire class down and ask everybody to self-quarantine, or if they were all over the school. And as we know, students, kids, K-12 age kids can be asymptomatic, meaning they are carrying it and nobody knows it, and then all of a sudden the symptom shows up and they've probably been, infected 3 or 4 days prior to the test coming back positive. So it's called contact tracing. We work with our health department, and based on that information determines the route we go in terms of the whole class. We will notify and share that information, but the key to that is using unidentifiable information. So no names, but we are going to be required to share that information. And then sometimes the student has a family member that has been tested positive, and they have been in the house, and they have been in with that 6 feet, 15-minute exposure. Again, we, have the kid quarantine. We do the contact tracing. If the student tests positive, then we go that route where they're going to quarantine, be closely watched, and then more than likely, depending again where they were, determining if it's just a classroom that we're going to have to shut down or a school.
I have a question on where is the testing going to be taking place at, and what is the lag time for results currently?
That's a great point. It was asked in our previous meeting with the staff, are we going to be screening kids? And we had a lively discussion at the board level last Monday night regarding this. And what I found out is we are responsible through HIPAA and FERPA to protect the students' medical privacy rights. So the way around that is the CDC and the health department have recommended that parents can self-monitor and screen before the kid comes to school and commit to that. And if they show any symptoms through the screening or the temperature taking, they will notify the school and keep the student home. The other way around it is to get parental consent, and that's the plan I am presenting tonight to the board, where the parent gives us the right to screen the student at school. And that again has to be within the guidelines of HIPAA and FERPA, where we're protecting that student's medical privacy rights. So be in an office, run through the screening questions and the temperature taking. If they pass it, they go on to school. If not, we'll call the parent to come and get the student. And depending on the symptoms, again, the exposure, the 6 foot within 15 minutes is a key thing in determining whether we recommend the student to get tested for COVID or they're just showing a symptom of a fever. And many of you are probably aware of this, but many of those symptoms, fever, stomach ache, sore throat, cough, all are associated with similar illnesses, the flu, strep throat, asthma issues. So that's where we're at in terms of screening students.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so if my child is showing some symptoms and then I decide to keep him home for the day, how does that impact? Are you guys looking at extending out attendance policy? Because I know you guys have so many days that's allowable, but if I decide to keep him home, but I don't want to take him to the doctor to see how he feels the next day.
Yeah, so let's be specific about, let's say that you find out your student's running a temperature and it's probably in that 100, 101 range. The guidelines is that you monitor your student, your child, and for 24 hours, if that fever goes down without the use of Tylenol or aspirin, then that student more likely was just dealing with a headache or some kind of little illness. They can come back to school. But again, the key is that that fever has to go down. And if that's the only symptom, by the way, and it goes down within 24 hours without the use of Tylenol or aspirin, the health department's recommendations that can come back to school.
Right, but what does that do for our attendance policy? Because now we're going to be a little bit more cautious, about sending our child to school. And my son doesn't miss much school, but I know there are parents out there that their kids miss a lot more. And now this is actually going to be pushing that envelope even more for those people.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be flexible with that. We're going to have to be. And obviously each case will be different. The difference, what you're talking about, a chronic absenteeism issue may or may not be health related. What you're talking about is a health related issue that certainly even pre-COVID, we work with families on that.
See you later. All right. Careful. Bye.
So there's
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add on to what was being said. So let's say if the child was sick and had to miss that day because that was a on-campus day, then they could just revert to the virtual learning option, since that's going to be the other option throughout the rest of the week then?
Yes, are you talking about a middle school or high school student who is coming face to face, but in the hybrid model, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so they would be able to keep up with pace, do the assignments like many of our teachers will be utilizing, taped lessons, unit introductions, those sort of things. And so the students certainly will be able to keep up virtually.
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
Is there a certain requirement or a mask that you guys are requiring our students to wear, or is any face covering going to be good for you? I know with all the studies that have been done recently, they're saying like gator masks and the light blue paper mask aren't as effective.
Yeah, so we're required to have disposable face masks on hand in case kids don't have one or don't bring one, or there's some challenges that they're just not going to be able to get their hands on. I've got Brian Leonard on, my director of facility and operations. I don't know if there's been any update from the school setting and the requirements, what you're referring to. So, Brian, have you heard anything?
I've not heard anything specific. I know there's a lot of studies that are going on in relation to a lot of different things. At this point, the stance of the district is we're following the recommendations from the CDC on their definition of a face covering or effective face covering, including homemade face coverings. So that's what I would defer, you two for guidance as far as what type of face mask or face covering to purchase.
There is some guidelines in terms of the cloth face coverings and or homemade cloth that they're laundered every day before the student comes back to school. And like I said, we will have disposable face masks for kids. Let's say they just run out of the house quickly and forget it. We will have a face mask for students in that situation as well. I know that's a specific example, but. So there was, go ahead.
So with the hybrid school learning, and you have kids that are going to school 2 days a week and online learning 3 days a week, what is it like one portal that the kids are going to have to log into? Do they have to be there at a certain time, like 7 o'clock in the morning, to check in for attendance purposes? Or is it just like whenever they feel like logging in, they just log in and do their work?
So for the remote days, on Wednesdays, there'll be a set schedule. They'll follow their hourly schedule just like they are in school. There'll be a first hour, and we've got a format of what that'll look like. They'll have a morning message. They'll have like a whole group session. They'll have small group sessions, and then individual if they need to. So it's set up that way for every hour. It will be recorded for students that absolutely cannot make it, and available in Google Classroom. Google Classroom will be 3rd grade through 12th grade, and then Seesaw will be K2. And then on the opposite days that they don't attend, there will be set hours for each hour, so they'll stagger. And again, don't quote me exactly what days are which, but one day will be like 1st, 3rd, and 5th hour. The next day will be 2nd, 4th, and 6th hour. And then you will be given the assignments within that with a time frame that they should be spending on it throughout that day.
Okay, are all the teachers going to be using the same portal and links, or is it just kind of like whatever the teacher decides to use as their learning tool, like it was at the end of this year?
So everybody will be on Google Classroom. We took a summer professional development with some very helpful resources for us this summer that they are using, like Screencastify or Edpuzzle, that they'll filter all of that information through. So we're trying to make it as simple as we can to make sure that the same platforms are the same all the way across. But obviously with different grade levels and different subjects, they may look a little different, but we're trying to be as friendly as we can so you don't have 100 different ones coming at you. Because I know that was something that was voiced at the end of last year, that it felt very confusing because of that. So.
All right, and one last question. How are CT classes going to work?
So we're in the process of finalizing what that looks like with the remote instruction and start dates and all of that. So that information will be coming out from Carrie Bulk. Probably, I would say probably the end of next week, but they will be offered.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I have a question.
What happens when a teacher tests positive for COVID? How does that look?
So again, they have to screen every day. There's an internal screening process that we have for all our staff. And so if they're feeling and recognizing any symptoms, they're going to stay home. But let's say they do test positive, then we go to that contact tracing process with the health department to figure out, were they in school teaching prior to being positive, which more than likely they are, and then determining, again, where they were. If they were all over the building, more than likely we're going to deal with shutting a building down. If it's their classroom and that's where we're through the contact tracing determines, we'll probably look at that. We've had some situations where the instructor had not been around anyone like a week prior to the test being positive. So that whole contact tracing process proved that they were not around any other staff, or they weren't around students. In particular, this was dealing with one of our co-curricular programs this summer. And so, they self-quarantined, got tested after the 14 or close to the end of the 14 days to determine whether they're rid of the COVID symptoms and virus. And that's kind of the process we'll use during the year. But again, it's that significance of the contact tracing and being within 6 feet for 15 or more minutes.
Right.
And a classroom teacher more than likely will be.
Right. Yeah, because that's what I was saying. Like, so contact tracing in a classroom of a third grader, I mean, they're going to be around all of those third graders. So do you shut down that classroom? Then they are self-quarantined for 2 weeks for that class?
If again, through that contact tracing, and it's determined that, she was around just about all the kids that, 15, 18 kids that are in that classroom. And then the other caveat is, what did she do, when a specials came in, or, at lunch, and
right.
Determining where she was in the building. And if she was all over the building, we might have to close that building down for a certain amount of time. The health department, Rebecca Burns, who is our health department officer, again, with all this planning that we have to do and all the requirements of Lansing, the one caveat and consistent has been working with our St. Joe Health Department, and she has been amazing. We had an issue a week ago, and she helped us walk through and making sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's, and so they've been real responsive. The staff members, have alerted us right away, but it's still scary, and we're going to do our best to limit that exposure and limit the time that kids need to be out, but make sure that everyone's safe to come back to.
Are 4th and 5th grade, are they doing self containment, or are they still splitting?
Yeah, as Nikki, I know you can chime in on this, but yes, so the 4th and 5th graders, have done, math. There's a teacher that teaches math and science, and then a teacher English, language arts, and social studies. So whatever class they need to, they'll push into those classes.
Okay, thank you.
Why is it that if all of the schools in Michigan are under the same basic restriction or rules from Governor Whitmer, that Paw middle schools and high schools are open 5 days a week for 6 to 6.5 hours a day, and Portage and Kalamazoo schools are open different amounts of days or different times, and then Three Rivers is just 2 days and 3 days online? How did they determine how many days they were actually going to be in person in school versus the other places that are, dealing with the same type of rules or restrictions from the governor?
Yeah, so Governor Whitmer allowed the local school districts to make these decisions based on the requirements that she put out for phase 4, if you will. And so in phase 4, allow school districts to conduct school face-to-face if they choose to. So again, I'll go back to a task team that we formed even about, I think it was about 3.5 weeks before Governor Whitmer even came out with her first roadmap in the end of June. And we, have about 39 people within our system that looked at all kinds of scenarios and a lot of conversations in the system. We met weekly, and from a standpoint where we're at today, we chose to offer face-to-face opportunities, as well as we knew we had families that weren't going to send their student regardless until probably there's a vaccine. And that's why we're offering Lincoln Learning as the learning platform for virtual learning.
So if it's still going to be open like she's allowing it, are those same 39 people going to make a decision in 2 months from now to maybe let kids come back to school 3 days a week or 4 days a week face-to-face to have more social interaction?
That's all going to depend on if we get moved into phase 5 or phase 6. The other reality is we might be moved into phase 3, where we're going to end up going back remote. So it really depends on the phase that out of Lansing they put us in and allow us. So the process will look very much the same like you described. Yes, we meet frequently anyways to review the process and procedures that we have in place to make sure that, we're taking care of kids, their social and emotional learning, their mental health. I mean, there's a lot of things that we have to do regardless of what phase we're in.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
So if we move to phase 1 to 3 for K through 5, how will we make that transition as far as, will all of K through 5 have Chromebooks when they start the year in preparation of moving to phase 1 through 3?
Yeah, so if I'm understanding your question, we start the school year like like we're talking about, where it's face-to-face for elementary kids 5 days a week. And all of a sudden, a month into it, Governor Whitmer moves us into phase 3 and we have to go remote. So yes, we have plenty of Chromebooks for our students. And actually we have, through the CARES Act and some of our bond money, we have additional Chromebooks coming in as well. So we have more than enough Chromebooks to meet the needs if we have to go back into phase 3.
And will preparation be done to prepare those young students and their parents on how to use Google Classroom?
Yes. Yeah, that was a big piece of information coming out of our spring that we heard loud and clear. So there will be a lot of preparation and instruction for our families, especially our elementary kids, but all our families.
I have a
question. Regarding the hybrid learning, will the parents how will they monitor if their child is on track with the school to make sure their homework is being done every day? Is there something we can do to look at to make sure they're doing it every day? Because I know last year some of them, my son would say, well, it says there's no date to turn it in, so I don't have to do it. So found out at the end of the year he had all these assignments that because it said no due date, he didn't think he had to do them.
Yeah. So I've got Carrie Balk on the line, my high school principal, and so I know she'll have a response to that. Are you with us, Carrie?
I know she's been having some connectivity problems. So just to answer that there will be, if you're in Google Classroom, there's not necessarily a parent portal, but you can set up notifications to come to you in the Google Classroom so that you can monitor what your student has to do. Same thing with Seesaw, there is that communication piece. So I would say it's a balance between checking those notifications and then, you know, I had a daughter that was a senior in the spring, and there were times where she's like, no, I'm not done, or I'm done, and I would check and just have to look at it. So it's kind of the balance between checking and then looking at those notifications. But if you're part of the virtual setting, there will be a parent portal that you can monitor as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was a problem at the end of last semester because there was so many different things. Like for the science for the 8th grade, which is what he was in last year, you didn't see that on Google Classroom. So to find out, you go into the Amplify that they were learning last year, you found out your child had done nothing because here in Google Classroom, it wasn't being assigned through that. So it was like had to go through 5 different, you know, portals to find out if your child was really on track or not.
Well, and the other part is there will be grades this time, so you will be able to monitor that on PowerSchool to make sure that the assignments are being completed as well.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How is CTE going to work? Because I know some people were talking about and worried about if they're only going 2 days a week, that they're not going to be able to get their full credits or hours or whatever done for their CTE assignment.
Yeah, and again, Carrie Balk will be looking at that. She's working with Tommy over at through the CTE program, and all of that information will be out within the week or so.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's what your CTE class.
I have a question.
So some of the students don't learn very well with online learning. So is there going to be like a tutor or some kind of help for those students that, since 3 out of the 5 days is online education, to kind of help them keep their grades up and understanding of the subjects at hand?
Yeah, so the days that they're face-to-face and what we're trying to get the transition of the thinking of what learning looks like, the classroom becomes a learning lab in a situation like this. So there is a week-long plan for the remote learning and how they will access it. When they come into the face-to-face, it's not going to be the teacher necessarily standing up in front of the class and teaching. They will have opportunities to have that support when they are face-to-face. So it is a huge transition for students. It's a huge transition for teachers on how to wrap their heads around what that remote learning looks like. I will say the training that we had this summer, which was a week-long training, about 13 hours, did provide us a whole different kind of insight than what we had in our crisis learning in the spring. So we're in the transition of that and looking at unit plans on how to make sure that we're supporting the students that are also remote when they're face-to-face.
And is there any kind of programs or anything to help set them up for their education afterwards? You know, a lot of them deal with their counselors to go to colleges and things like that. And are they still going to get that assistance?
Yep. So our counselors are still there. They can visit with them when they go to school, or they can set up virtual times, I'm sure, along the way. So all of those services will still be there.
Okay.
We also have, I know some students see CMH support, or they go to Pause Clinic. All of that will still be available.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I have a question. The question is that for the middle school and the high school virtual learning, how are they going to get their schedule? Are we going to be notified by email, or are we supposed to be expecting a phone call, or what?
So your schedule will be in Power School, so you can get on your Power School when that goes live, when that's all set. And I don't know if Mr. Bingaman or Mr. Olson's on here, if they're planning to mail those or not. But typically they're on Power School, and they may be even sent out school messenger.
Okay. My next question is that if school is really going to be starting on the 24th, and that's the same day as the virtual learning, right?
Mr. Moog, do you want to talk to that?
I sure will. And it's Ron, by the way. Mr. Moog's my dad. So I'm making a recommendation tonight through a lot of collaboration with our district team, made up of teachers and support staff and district staff, our district administrators, central office folks, our teacher union, and our board, making a recommendation that we start school on September 8th. Governor Whitmer is coming out Saturday with her bipartisan Republican and Democrats at the state level with some more added, we really don't know what, there's some more information and maybe some added requirements for returning to school. And so we're not going to know until she announces it Saturday. So we want to make sure that we're going to start school off right. And that's why we're having these town hall meetings. And so that's my recommendation tonight that's going in front of the board to get their approval to start school on September 8th. So virtual school would start on September 8th.
Okay, that's understandable.
What about families that need help with Wi-Fi or anything like that?
That's a great question, Robert. I'm glad you asked that. So last spring, we increased our coverage outside of every school building so that you can get access to the internet at any one of our schools at any time of the day. We will again utilize our mobile hotspots that we created, a couple vans and a bus, and we're gonna work. I've got Nick Bryant, my director of technology, working hard on figuring out, based on the information we got last spring, where would be those optimum spots to park the bus so that families can have increased internet access. It's not going to be 100%, but I believe that barring what we have available, and if we've got any new money coming in from the federal government, I'm sure we'll revisit what more we can do, but that's where we're at right now with increasing internet access for our families.
How is the child going to be able to get a Chromebook? Because at the end of last semester, we were never notified that the child could go to the school to get a Chromebook. So how will the parents get that, or the child get that from the school? Do they go in and say, I need a Chromebook for my virtual learning days, or?
No, so we know who the families are, and if you're one of them, and that building principal will be in communication with those students in their building that are doing 100% virtual to connect with them to make sure that if they need a Chromebook, we're going to get them a Chromebook.
Well, how about the hybrid?
The same thing.
Okay, well, we were never notified last year for our students, so we was not on that list. So my son was doing all of his homework on our phone.
Okay. So what grade is your son going into?
He's going into 9th.
Okay. So I would reach out to Carrie Balk or her crew at the high school to make sure that they know that your son needs a Chromebook.
Okay, thank you so much.
You bet.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I was wondering, first about busing. For us parents that chose to take our kids to school, but have multiple kids. I have one in high school, middle school, and elementary. Is there going to be, like, are we going to have to wait till the bell rings before we can let them out? Or, because, I mean, that's not a big gap to get everybody where they need to be.
Sorry, to understand your question, are you asking, you know, are we staggering departure times out of the building?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a strongly recommended strategy. I know at the elementary, they're going to be releasing by grade level. If any of you have ever flown in the last month and a half, you know that many of the airlines do the same thing. They go by row. We're going to take that same concept. So it's just not going to be a free-for-all, kids, you know, running out of the building. It's going to be pretty systematic.
Okay. Okay. And then I have one more question. For like those that are seniors this year, are they still going to have the opportunity to get their scholarships and all that for academics and sports and all of that? Are they still going to get that opportunity?
Could you repeat that? You kind of broke up in amongst your question.
I'm sorry. I was wondering if seniors this year get the same opportunities to get scholarships for sports and as they would normally.
Yeah, so academically, it's going to be just like a normal year. Working, she should or he should work through the high school counseling department. It all depends on if we have athletics or not. So I know for the fall, the Michigan High School Athletic Association is going to make a determination on fall sports next Thursday, August 20th.
Okay.
So if we have sports and competition, the opportunity to be fortunate enough to get a scholarship would be, you know, available. If we don't have sports, unless they play club sports or outside of school sanctioned sports, that's another way where kids get discovered too. So,
okay.
Well, I need to close our meeting out because we have a board meeting starting in a minute. I can't thank all of you, all 200. We had 250 participants for most of the time. We are saving the questions. Our team, both from central office and building level, will look at the questions, get answers to them, and repost those. So again, I appreciate all the questions and comments, and hopefully you all have a great evening.
Ron, can anyone that wants to stay on for the board meeting stay on?
Yes, I believe so. Thanks, Ann. I text Catherine to see how that would work if we end up going above 250.
Joe Graber is John. I can stay on, or one of the or some of the principals can stay on, and if there's further questions you and I need to answer, they can let us know.
Yeah. I guess we're supposed to use the same link.
No, it's the same. This is Catherine. It's the same meeting.
Okay.
So the board meeting is on the same meeting invite.
Thanks, Catherine.
It's okay because my husband Joe is broadcasting it on Zoom and he put it on Facebook for people who want to join.